My name is Lawrence Butch Turk. I'm a registered nurse. I work for Greenpeace, USA. I'm a disarmament campaigner. I'm working to achieve United States, but also worldwide disarmament, particularly of nuclear weapons. For 30 years, Greenpeace has identified as a priority ridding the world of nuclear weapons. In fact, the first Greenpeace action, the first ship we had sailed up to Amchitka Atoll in the Aleutians to stop United States nuclear weapons testing. And from that, Greenpeace was born. The reason we're involved in Star Wars is that we believe absolutely that what National Missile Defense, otherwise known as Star Wars, is going to do is start a new nuclear arms race. That as people believe that we have a system that might work, they'll build more and more sophisticated nuclear weapons in order to defeat such a system. And so that the United States and the world as a whole will become much, much less secure. So Greenpeace has taken it on as a priority to defeat the United States' national missile defense plans in order to foster worldwide nuclear disarmament. So we're working in countries around the planet to achieve this end. Just south of here, about 4 hours, is Vandenberg Air Force Base, which is where the target missiles in a Star Wars test is launched from. And so we are focusing very much on this testing. Target missiles are launched from Vandenberg Air Force Base. Killer missiles are launched from Kwajalein Atoll in the equatorial Pacific. We're very much focused on bringing worldwide attention to these tests, bearing witness to the wrong that is being done at Vandenberg Air Force Base, and trying to defeat the program. I've been working on nuclear weapons issues for 25 years now, and I really had hope around the time of the collapse of the Soviet Union, around the time where we were anticipating a peace dividend here in this country. I really had hope that the world could move towards nuclear disarmament. But it hasn't turned out that way. The pace of nuclear disarmament between Russia and the United States has been incredibly slow. Pakistan and India have tested new nuclear weapons. And now we have Star Wars. And Star Wars absolutely is a nuclear weapons issue, because what it means is as the United States builds a missile system, a missile defense system, whether it works or not, if other nations perceive that it will work, they will then build up their nuclear arsenals, if they feel threatened by the United States, in order to defeat it. And not only that, but they will have every reason to fear a United States nuclear first strike, one where much of their arsenal is taken out by a first strike by the United States, and then the rest is perhaps cleaned up or defended against by a national missile defense system. So there is no separating national missile defense and the nuclear arms race. They mean exactly the same thing. There are any number of corporations receiving money to build the Star Wars system. We are talking about a huge, highly technological, very, very expensive, entirely experimental system. But there are 4 major corporations that have received the contracts for the system. Boeing Corporation is the general contractor. They're in charge of making sure that everything works. Raytheon Corporation is in charge of making the kill vehicle. It sits atop an interceptor missile and is designed to strike an incoming warhead. Lockheed Martin is in charge of making that interceptor missile itself that the kill vehicle rides upon. And then finally, TRW is in charge of the radar systems and the targeting for detecting an attack and then for directing the response to that attack. All of these corporations are raking in huge amounts of money for the Star Wars, as well as other military defense systems. Not coincidentally, they are all large contributors to American political campaigns and spend even more millions of dollars on lobbying, both within the Pentagon, Congress, and the executive branch, to ensure that those huge defense contracts come to them. Their purpose in life is to make themselves bigger and make their profits bigger and make their investors happy and make their CEOs and board members and executives rich. And they're very good at doing that type of work. And as General Eisenhower, President Eisenhower warned us, we need to beware the military-industrial complex, that our Pentagon and our military contractors, there is no distinction between them anymore. One feeds off of the other, one supports the other, and all serve to corrupt the American political process in order to ensure that the contracts for continued unnecessary, unsafe, dangerous weapons systems continue to flow towards them. I just can't see the argument that national missile defense is going to provide greater peace and security for the planet. I absolutely believe that what we're talking about is a new nuclear arms race with it. And so it's frightening, but I'm left with the only other possibilities being, number one, pure profit motive, that they don't care about the security of the United States. They're just in it to make sure that they are able to stay alive as corporate entities and keep making these weapon systems. And number two is not so much to provide for the security of the United States, but to provide for the dominance of the rest of the world by the United States. That through this and other military systems, the United States is able to impose its will, Pax Americana, upon the rest of the world, no matter what the people in the rest of the world think. When we talk about the money involved, we are talking about huge amounts. In fact, nobody really knows how much will be involved in a Star Wars system because it hasn't been built, and so much of the technology is untested, and who knows what it will end up costing. We've already spent, in today's dollars, $100 billion on Star Wars since Reagan originally proposed it, and we have nothing to show for it. Certain predictions, the General Accounting Office predicted that a Star Wars system would cost $60 billion. Other predictions have said $120 billion. The history of military contracting in this country is that everything always costs much more than the highest estimates. So pick a figure out of the air and then double it, and that might be what we're going to end up spending on this program. It does concern me that technologies of all sorts that are developed in this country can be spread to other countries. And certainly the record shows that that happened. It was just a few years before the Gulf War that we were supplying Iraq with highly sophisticated weapons. As we have made any advance in our own nuclear weapons, we have seen that other nations, either through acquiring our own technology or through being prodded to develop their own, have made similar advances not very far behind us. So I think the history shows that we have often had our own weapons in one form or another turned against us, and that this very well may be the case with continuing advances in military technology. The only way we can make ourselves safer is to stop this cycle, and that is to stop making the advances and use our moral weight and any other weight that we and the peace-loving people of the world have to prevent others from making these same kinds of advances. National missile defense, Star Wars, would require that the United States abrogate the 1972 anti-ballistic missile treaty that we have with Russia. Russia has said that if we abrogate that treaty, then all treaties are endangered, that Russia would consider our rejection of such an important cornerstone treaty as the ABM Treaty to be a rejection of all efforts towards nuclear limitation and nuclear weapons disarmament. China has indicated that their only response would be to build up their arsenal of just a couple of dozen intercontinental ballistic missiles to a much larger force, one which is able to either fool or overwhelm any national missile defense we've built. Other nations around the world, our European allies, in varying degrees have expressed concern, if not outright opposition, to national missile defense. Both the Koreas have expressed strong reservations about it. There are huge technical hurdles, and many physicists, military experts have claimed that national missile defense cannot work, that it would be too easy for opposing nations to use relatively unsophisticated decoys, and I mean unsophisticated compared to an intercept missile itself, to fool a system, to launch multiple warheads or multiple missiles in order to overwhelm a system. But the problem here isn't that it's sufficient to say we don't need to worry about it because it will never work. If opposing nations and militaries always look at worst-case scenarios, if they think it may work, they're going to have to respond in kind, even if they think odds are it's not going to work. They've got to assume it might in order to defend their own interests. That's just how militaries operate, and it's one of the reasons we're in the problems and the troubles we're in now, is that we've got these enormously powerful militaries, often more powerful politically and economically than the governments they defend, and their job in life, their mission as life, is to look at worst-case scenarios and deal with it. And so you have this never-ending cycle of militaries always building up because they're always looking at the worst possibilities, and none of them are willing to take a risk for peace. There are several arguments against Star Wars. I've already mentioned that we're going to start a new nuclear arms race. Another big one is the technical problems with it, and this is a legitimate reason to oppose Star Wars. We could end up spending billions and billions and billions of dollars to defend, number one, against a threat that may not be real, and number two, with a system that may not end up working in the long run. There have been huge difficulties so far, and it's just such a waste of our nation's resources to be investing all this money in a program that many believe can't and won't work, when if instead we were investing in initiatives for peace. If the technical problems are solved with Star Wars, if we can indeed hit a bullet with a bullet, if we can hit every bullet fired at us with a bullet, and if we can discern between bullets and decoys, even then we have big problems. Because whenever a defense is made, whether it's the castle walls of medieval Europe leading to the use of gunpowder and cannons, or our current situation, there will be nations out there trying to overwhelm, to go around, or to fool those defenses. And so all we are doing is creating a new spiral of whether nuclear or other means of continuing arms race, when we really have a chance with the end of the Cold War, we still have a chance to actually figure out a way to have a more peaceful world, at least one in which we're not threatening each other's or the survival of the species itself. Vandenberg Air Force Base is an integral part of, perhaps in some people's mind, the most important facility of the United States' Space Command. So it is not just where Star Wars and National Missile Defense is tested, but it's also the main launching platform for most of our military satellites and other military outer space experiments and programs. Whenever you see satellite pictures that are used for targeting weapons on Iraq or Colombia or wherever, more than likely that satellite was launched from Vandenberg Air Force Base. Star Wars, National Missile Defense, is just the first step, just the launching pad, so to speak, for a whole range of United States military aspirations for space. In a 1997 document called Vision 2020, these aspirations were laid out in very clear and, to me, quite frightening detail, where it was unashamedly stated that the world is moving more towards separation between the haves and the have-nots, and the haves, of course, would be the United States and its allies, and that this would lead to conflict in the future, and that it was very important for the United States to seize the high ground in this future conflict, and the high ground being space. And so Star Wars, National Missile Defense, in some respects, is just an attempt to get Americans used to the idea of using space, of using the heavens, for military purposes, even more than we are now. Of course, we use it for surveillance purposes now, but for actually placing weapons in space, that is what the United States Pentagon foresees, and foresees doing in a very big way. So we're talking about hunter-killer satellites designed to knock out other satellites. We're talking about space-based lasers. We're talking about perhaps even nuclear weapons or other weapons of mass destruction stationed in space for achieving the ability to rain down upon any place on the planet, anytime, day or night, at a moment's notice. It is a beautiful section of California coastline. I think it has the advantage of being remote from large population centers. It's a huge space, 15 by 50 miles, give or take. Being on the coast, they are able to launch missiles directly over the ocean so that missiles, rockets to launch satellites are not passing over populated areas. Stopping Star Wars and National Missile Defense is going to take a wide range of tactics carried out by people within the United States, around the world, and from all walks of life. Concerned citizens, scientists, political leaders, military leaders who have seen the light are all going to have to stand up and point out the problems with Star Wars and speak their voices very strongly. And those voices can be aired in a number of ways. Certainly one of those ways that has been historically important for any social change has been nonviolent civil disobedience or direct action. It's something that Greenpeace, as well as many other organizations, have used with great success over time, from the civil rights movements of the 60s to the anti-nuclear movements of the 70s, feminist movements, on down the road. Nonviolent civil disobedience speaks with a clarity and a strength that many other tactics do not. People willing to put their freedom, their very bodies on the line in a nonviolent manner to say no to a particular system, a particular program that they oppose. We instead support a vision that is peaceful, a vision which is more respectful of humanity, a vision which is a wiser spending of money. Vandenberg itself has a history of the use of nonviolent direct action. It was very important that back in 1983, people at Vandenberg Air Force Base, as well as people in Montana, my own home, or Utah and Nevada, were using direct action as well as other tactics to say no to the MX missile. And in fact, the MX missile program was scaled way back from original proposals. I think it's important that we use this kind of direct action at Vandenberg to make the public aware, because the public hears missile defense and they think it's a good idea. They don't know that there are very reasoned objections to the program. You know, most importantly, that their own safety is endangered by national missile defense. It's also important that dramatic actions are seen by people around the world, that the people in Denmark, the people in the United Kingdom, both of which are slated to host radar facilities that are key to national missile defense, see that people in the United States are willing to take strong action against national missile defense. Now, when I say Denmark, I actually mean the greater Denmark, in that the radar facility would be sited on Greenland, but Greenland, in terms of national foreign policy and defense policy, is a part of Denmark. So the people of Greenland, the people of Denmark, the people of the United Kingdom need to see that we are working hard here in order to energize their own already successful campaigns against national missile defense. Greenpeace, since about 1995, had not been actively involved either in the United States or internationally in disarmament issues. With the signing of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, with the ending of nuclear weapons testing, Greenpeace kind of took a hiatus from disarmament activities and worked on some of the many other issues that we worked on. With the advancement, though, of national missile defense and the actual leap into the testing of missile systems, Greenpeace decided that we, unfortunately, once again had to get back into the disarmament game in a big way. And we decided to focus our first efforts on Vandenberg Air Force Base and the test held last July 7th at Vandenberg Air Force Base. At that time, 7 of us, including myself, walked onto the base. 7 of us from Greenpeace, I should say. There were other people from the Vandenberg Action Coalition who were out there too and who entered the base. Went into the base in an effort to get as close to the test as we could prior to its launch. I myself was able to get within a quarter mile of the test silo. Others got within a third of the mile of the test silo. Our intention was to bear witness to the test and perhaps by placing our bodies in harm's way to affect the military's decision to carry out the test. Unfortunately, they did launch the test anyhow. On October 7th of 2000, Greenpeace, Vandenberg Action Coalition, and other organizations joined with the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space to mark an international day of protest against the militarization of space. We all helped organize a demonstration at Vandenberg Air Force Base, which came off extraordinarily well. 250 people, great rally, great music, and it ended with 23 people crossing the line of the front gate at Vandenberg Air Force Base and being arrested for their nonviolent witness to the crimes committed within the base. We ended up getting a lot of attention for this action because actor Martin Sheen was one of the 23 who chose to cross the line and was subsequently arrested. And so we managed to get the President of the United States, or at least the acting president, in his role as president on the series The West Wing, arrested in opposition to national missile defense. For the July 7th action, the reason we were there was to bring worldwide attention to Star Wars, to national missile defense systems, to the problems with it, and to hopefully encourage people around the world to also speak up in opposition to Star Wars. October 7th had a bit of a broader mission in that it was addressing the entire range of the militarization of space. And it was a unique event in that what we did at Vandenberg was only one part of what ended up being demonstrations in 63 cities, 17 countries around the world, people saying, no, the heavens, space itself, should be kept for peace. We've already militarized every part of the planet, save Antarctica. Maybe we should step back and say, no, we're not going to bring our weapons, our military policies, our hatreds, our warfighting to space itself. We, Greenpeace I mean, chose to use the tactic of a backcountry action, of actually going to where the test is being carried out, largely because it fits in with the history of what Greenpeace has done for 30 years now. We don't shy away from actually going to the site of a crime and putting ourselves in the way. That's not to say that what we do is more important than other types of demonstrations, other ways of speaking out. But what we do well is we go right to the site of whatever horror is being committed. We speak to the people who are committing that horror, whether it is whaling, the dumping of radioactive materials at sea, or in this case, the launching of a new nuclear arms race. And we go right up to the fences, the gates, the silos, and we say, no, this must stop, and it must stop here. I'm not particularly worried about jail time myself. It's certainly a possibility, and I'm willing to accept it, but it's not going to do anything to deter my efforts to achieve nuclear disarmament. I first was arrested 25 years ago outside a missile base, and the time that I've spent in jail and the number of arrests that I've had since haven't stopped my work yet. And so I don't think any sentence the folks at Vandenberg may impose will stop my work. And this issue is just so important. I'm a nurse, and part of being a nurse is to try and improve the health of patients and the community at large. And our planet is not healthy. It's a sick situation when people are threatening each other with weapons of mass destruction, weapons which can kill millions at the push of a button. And it's something we have to stop now. And a few days, weeks, or months in jail are so small compared to that. I have no problem accepting that risk. During the July test, we had our action at Vandenberg Air Force Base, but we also sent activists to Kwajalein Atoll, which is where the interceptor missile is launched for the Star Wars tests. And these two activists, one from the United States, actually my hometown in Montana, and another from Germany, were able to get onto the atoll where the interceptor missile silo is and deploy a banner right outside the silo just a very short time before the interceptor was scheduled to launch, causing great consternation and even panic to the military forces there, who rushed out to arrest these people before the test could be delayed by their presence there. I don't think that what Greenpeace does or the tactics we choose are the sole way to oppose national missile defense. I think there's a wide range of opposition that can happen, that in fact needs to happen if Star Wars is to be stopped. It's not going to be just lifelong activists like me that stop Star Wars. It's going to be doctors, lawyers, physicists, house husbands, childcare workers, all of them standing up saying, don't waste our money on this crazy system. Spend money on things more important. Don't make us less secure by imposing a Star Wars system on the planet. And so they have so many ways to speak up. There's the letter writing, letters to the editor, letters to their congresspeople. There's working to elect decent people. There's protesting outside of the military contractors' facilities, which are around the country and around the world. There's supporting activists with money, with housing, with bringing them a cup of hot chocolate when they're locked down outside of a gate. Look at the history of military policy and foreign policy, and while the rhetoric can be extremely different, one often finds that there aren't these huge differences between Democratic and Republican administrations. If you take away the dedicated funding of the U.S. government, things like Social Security and veterans benefits, which are set in law, over half of our discretionary national budget is going to the military. And this is a time when our schools are falling apart, where people can't get prescription health care benefits, and the choice is clear. Either you fund things like national missile defense and our massive other military programs, or you fund human needs, you fund the environment. So as we go further down this road, the choices will become clear. Do you want your kids to go to decent schools? Do you want to be able to pay for the medicines you need? Do you want to live in a healthy neighborhood? Do you want to have a clean environment? It's either those things or things like Star Wars. I think the most important thing in motivating people to oppose Star Wars is education. So far they've been fooled. They hear the words national missile defense and they think, hey, that sounds like a good idea. I want to be protected from missiles. They don't know how much it will cost. They don't know what we'll have to sacrifice. They don't know the technical problems involved and the fact that it very well may not work. And they certainly don't know that it's going to spark a new nuclear arms race and that it's going to thus make us less safe, not more safe. And so I think once we're able to get those arguments out there, once we're able to talk to people and drown out some of the noise put out by the corporations like Boeing and the Pentagon, that's what will encourage people to join our movement to oppose Star Wars. People throughout Europe, throughout Asia, throughout the Middle East are standing up and saying no to national missile defense. I think it's important that we look towards getting out our message through the media as well as through any other means we can, word of mouth, the web, and so forth. We need to reach people, and the way you reach people is through the mass media. People watch television, they read their newspapers, they listen to their radios, and that's the way they get their information in a very busy world. And I'm not so worried about media slants because one of the beauties of nonviolent direct action is that we are honest about what we're doing, we're acting from principle, we're not acting out of motivation for profit, and we're doing what we believe is right from our hearts. And that no matter how you slant that, in the end, people see through the slant, see through the spin, and see through the truth of what we're trying to put out there. I think it's shameful what America is doing. that we have the arrogance to think that just because at the moment we happen to have a strong economy and a strong military, that gives us some sort of moral right to impose our will upon the rest of the world, to say, we are going to space, we are going to arm space, we're going to militarize space, we're going to put weapons up in space, and the rest of the world, that's just too bad. We can do it, so we're going to. We really have to become a bit more humble as a nation and realize, as our first astronauts point out to us, that it's really just a small blue marble that we live on, and we've got to figure out a way to live decently on it, as opposed to constantly trying to figure out a way to make it a more dangerous place. I think it's important to realize that Star Wars and national missile defense is merely a stepping stone towards a much more dangerous future envisioned by the United States military, and that's one in which all of space is militarized to the benefit of the United States. That if the American people can be fooled into accepting national missile defense as being a good thing, that it will be that much easier to move towards space-based lasers, hunter-killer satellites, and the further weaponization of space.